Now, against the backdrop of possible US military action in Syria, Mike Pompeo, the man who could be America's next Secretary of State, has appeared to confirm reports that back in February, some 200 Russians were killed in clashes with US-led forces in Syria. The fighters were reportedly Russian mercenaries supporting President Assad. Mr. Pompeo referenced the incident at his confirmation hearing, where he was asked if more sanctions were needed on Russia.
Vladimir Putin has not yet received the message sufficiently, and we need to continue to work at that. But it hasn't just been sanctions. The largest expulsion of 60 folks was from this administration. This administration announced a nuclear posture review that has put Russia on notice that we're going to recapitalize our deterrent force in Syria. Now, a handful of weeks ago, the Russians met their match, and a couple hundred Russians were killed. The list of actions that this administration has taken, I'm happy to walk through each of them, but I don't want to take up much more time.
And I appreciate
the list
that.
is pretty long, man.
Confirmation hearing there for Mike Pompeo. With me in the studio is Yuri Vendik. He's from BBC Russia Service. What do you make of what is being said there about Russian mercenaries being killed by US-led attacks?
It is actually very interesting because there have been a lot of noise about that incident, which took place not a couple of weeks ago, as Pompeo said, but a couple of months ago.
Well, indeed, in February.
In February, on the 8th of February, between 7th and 8th, somewhere in the night. And so the incident was... Initially, there were reports and even semi-anonymous accounts of the witnesses of the Russian mercenaries there, that there were actually up to 300 dead and wounded, and all of them were members of that Russian private military company, Wagner. But then the numbers were never confirmed. No Russians, no Syrians, neither
well, indeed,
Americans.
Russia has not brought this to light. Why not?
Sorry.
Russia has not brought this to light.
No, and the numbers were never confirmed, even by the Americans. And now, when the former head of CIA, just by the way, mentions that 200 of Russians were killed, that sounds strange. But nobody knows actually what exactly does that mean.
Well, yes, I mean it was mentioned as a sign, but in fact it is very significant. And what is Wagner or Wagner?
Wagner is unofficial name of a private military company, the Russian private military company, which actually exists only unofficially, because being mercenary is still illegal in Russia. And that's a criminal offense. And the private military companies are illegal also. So that is, say, a company which exists illegally, but at the same time, as we understand, this is a very significant, very important part of the Russian operations in Syria. Sorry,
just to interrupt you, Will, the pictures we're seeing now are those of people who allegedly died in these attacks. Now, one might speculate that the reason that Russia has not talked about this before, or indeed it hasn't been talked about before at all, is that domestically for the Russians this would be a politically very difficult, wouldn't it?
Yes, it would be politically very sensitive. On the one hand, the official position, the official stance is that with Wagner, those Russian mercenaries, they are absolutely autonomous. They act on their own with their Syrian counterparts there in Syria, and the Russian state and the Russian Ministry of Defense do not have any responsibility for them. On the other hand, it's open secret for all, say, Russian media and experts that they are just an extension of the Russian army there on the ground.
Yeah, I suspect that we'll hear more about that. Thank you very much indeed. Yuri Vendik there joining us in the studio.